I was 6 years old when my parents told me we might be adopting a little girl. They sat me down in the living room, smiles lighting up their faces, and my heart swelled with excitement. Finally, I wouldn't have to spend those long, lonely afternoons inventing games by myself in the backyard. The idea of having someone to share my toys with, someone to talk to, was the best news I'd ever received. When they brought Emma home, it felt like a dream come true. She was 3, quiet but curious. We played together, shared snacks, and for a while, my little world felt fuller and happier. I had a sister, and my 6-year-old self took that responsibility seriously. I wanted to be the best big brother ever. But soon, things began to shift in ways I couldn't fully understand. The changes were small at first. Canceled family outings when Emma wasn't in the mood, dinner menus adjusted to her tastes, or skipped bedtime stories when Emma needed attention. I tried to be patient, telling myself it was just temporary, but the little signs grew larger over time. It wasn't just that Emma got attention, it was how everything seemed to revolve around her. My parents missed my school plays, but they never missed Emma's dance recitals. My mom quit her accounting job to stay home with Emma while I'd spent my early childhood with a revolving door of teenage babysitters who ignored me. The loneliness I thought I'd escaped came back, sharper and colder. Then came the birthday change. Emma didn't know her real birthday, so my parents decided she would share mine. They presented it as a beautiful family tradition, calling it an honor. At first I believed them. We had joint parties, and I tried to enjoy them, but year after year, the celebrations drifted further from me and centered completely on Emma. I watched as relatives arrived with armfuls of gifts for her, while my own were an afterthought. The one day that was supposed to feel special slowly became a reminder of how invisible I was in my own family. By the time I was 10, birthdays weren't something I looked forward to. They were something I endured. Emma chose the themes, the cakes, and even the guest lists. While she filled the house with her friends, I was limited to inviting just 5. My best friend once stopped talking to me for weeks after I couldn't invite him. I tried asking my parents for separate celebrations, but they brushed me off with familiar guilt trips. Emma had a rough start in life, they'd say. Why can't you just share one day? And so I learnt to swallow my disappointment and play the role of the good brother. But the hurt was always there, growing quietly like a shadow. As the years rolled on, my role in the family grew clearer. Emma was the star, and I was something in the background. I don't think my parents meant to make me feel that way, but intentions didn't change reality. My accomplishments, my needs, my voice, they all seemed to fade in comparison to Emma's. I remember coming home with a certificate for winning the school science fair when I was 11. I'd worked for weeks on that project, staying up late with just a flashlight and some old books from the library. When I burst through the door, I was ready to share my excitement, but my mom barely looked up from helping Emma with her latest art project. "That's great, honey," she said, her voice distracted. "Go put it on the fridge." So I did. I stuck it on the fridge door with a magnet, right next to Emma's finger paintings and dance ribbons. By the next morning, my certificate had been buried under more of Emma's artwork, barely visible. I stood there, staring at the cluttered fridge, feeling like maybe I'd just imagined winning that fair. It wasn't just the big moments. The small, everyday things hurt too. My parents' praise for Emma was endless. Her dance steps were graceful, her paintings inspired. I didn't expect constant applause, but a little acknowledgement would have meant everything. Instead, I got the usual reminders to be more responsible or set a good example. I told myself to toughen up, that maybe I was being too sensitive. But deep down, it felt like I was slowly disappearing. My refuge became the garage. It was a dusty, cluttered space filled with forgotten tools and boxes of old stuff, but to me, it was freedom. I started tinkering with anything I could find: cardboard, old bottles, broken jewelry. I loved turning scraps into something beautiful. That garage became mine. It was the one place where Emma didn't follow, where my parents didn't hover. I spent hours watching DIY videos, learning how to craft things with my hands. Each creation felt like a tiny victory, a reminder that I existed, that I could make something meaningful. By my teenage years, that hobby had become my lifeline. While my parents attended Emma's dance competitions and art showcases, I was in the garage, creating. I sold my first handmade bracelet online when I was 15. It was a simple thing, just beads and wire, but someone out there thought it was worth paying for. That was a kind of validation I hadn't felt in years. I reinvested every dollar I made, buying better tools and supplies. My room transformed into a mini workshop, shelves filled with materials and half-finished projects. The more I created, the more I felt like myself. This was something Emma couldn't take over, something my parents couldn't dismiss. But even with my growing success, my parents barely noticed. They were too busy planning Emma's future, talking about her potential, her bright path ahead. I was just the quiet kid who spent too much time in the garage. I thought things might change when I turned 18 and moved out. I rented a tiny apartment using money from my online sales. The freedom was exhilarating. For the first time, I was in control of my own space, my own time. But the distance didn't change much. Our family dinners were still about Emma's achievements. My updates about my growing business were met with polite nods and quick subject changes. It was clear Emma was their golden child, and I was something else. A shadow, a side note. But I kept going. My business grew, my skills sharpened, and my confidence started to bloom. I spent late nights packaging orders, writing product descriptions, and learning the ins and outs of online marketing. Every time a customer left a positive review, it felt like a little piece of the validation I'd missed for so long. 3 years of hard work and sacrifice later, I finally had enough saved to open a physical store. A real place where people could see my work, where I could share my passion with the world. When I signed that lease, it felt like the universe was finally giving me a nod of approval. This was my moment. I was ready to step out of the shadows. But of course, my parents had other plans. When I finally told my parents about the store opening, I hoped for something different. Maybe a glimmer of pride, a sign that they saw me and the years of work I'd poured into this dream. For a moment, I got it. My mom's eyes lit up, and my dad clapped me on the shoulder. "That's incredible, son," he said. It felt like sunshine breaking through the clouds, but clouds don't clear that easily. 5 minutes later, the conversation took a turn, as it always did. My mom's smile faltered. "You know," she said, glancing at Emma, who was flipping through her phone, "Emma's graduation is right around the same time. Maybe we could combine your store opening with her celebration?" Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. My moment, the one I'd worked for, sacrificed for, reduced to another shared event. Just like those birthdays. Just like every other milestone that had been swallowed by Emma's needs. I took a deep breath, trying to keep my voice steady. "No, this is important to me. I want it to be separate." They stared at me, confusion etched on their faces, as if I'd said something completely unreasonable. My dad's eyebrows pulled together. "But it would make things so much easier for everyone," he insisted. "We could invite everyone at once. You know how busy people are." Busy people. Busy with Emma, I thought bitterly. I shook my head. This is my store opening. I want it to be about that, not about Emma's graduation. My mom's voice took on that familiar, disappointed tone. "Why are you being so difficult? You know how much this means to her. Can't you just share for once?" That was it. For once? The years of joint birthdays, of being invisible, of swallowing my hurt. It all surged up like a wave. I clenched my fists, my voice trembling. I've always shared. My birthdays, my accomplishments, everything. This time, I'm not sharing. Their faces shifted from confusion to shock. It was like they couldn't comprehend why I wasn't folding under the usual pressure. My mom's eyes narrowed, and she whispered the word that always came when I stood up for myself. Selfish. But this time, the guilt didn't land. I'd built this business with my own hands, through late nights, early mornings, and sheer determination. There was nothing selfish about wanting one moment to be mine. When they realized I wouldn't back down, my dad's voice turned cold. "Fine, maybe we just won't come at all." For a moment, the hurt flared. The idea of my own parents not showing up to my biggest achievement stung. But then a strange calm settled over me. I met his eyes and shrugged. "That's your choice. They didn't expect that. They thought their absence would break me, that I'd cave like I always did. But I didn't. I was done shrinking myself to fit their idea of what a good son should be." When they left, the silence in my apartment felt heavy, but also freeing. I wasn't sure how things would play out, but one thing was clear. This store opening would be mine no matter who showed up. A few days later, I vented online, pouring out my frustration in a post. I didn't expect much, maybe some words of support or a few strangers telling me they understood, but one comment caught my eye, a simple suggestion that made everything click into place. Use their plan against them. Let the joint celebration happen, and make sure your store launch outshines everything. The more I thought about it, the more it made sense. My store opening was something tangible, something people could benefit from. Discounts, first access to products, a real event people would talk about. A college graduation, no matter how impressive, couldn't compete with that. I sent my parents a message, pretending to reconsider. "You're right," I wrote. "Let's combine the events." Their excitement was instant. My mom called, her voice bright and relieved. "I knew you'd come around," she said. I could almost hear the self-satisfaction in her tone. They thought they'd won, but this time, I had a plan. I attended every planning meeting, nodding along as they made everything about Emma. Decorations in her favorite colors, a guest list packed with her friends, a program centered around her achievements. I stayed quiet, playing the role of the cooperative son, all the while preparing for the moment they wouldn't see coming. When the invitations went out, the cards were gold-trimmed and elegant, with Emma's graduation celebration written in bold letters. My store opening wasn't even mentioned. Perfect. I spent those weeks preparing my announcement, designing promotional materials, coordinating with the venue staff, and quietly spreading the word to my own network of friends, loyal customers, and distant family members who supported my work. I wasn't angry anymore. I was ready. The day of the combined celebration arrived bright and clear. The venue was decorated with gold and white, Emma's chosen theme. Banners with her name hung from the walls, and tables were draped with shimmering cloths. My parents buzzed around, making sure everything was perfect for her. Emma, of course, looked radiant, her smile smug and confident. This was her day. Everyone knew it, everyone except me. I stayed in the background, keeping to the edges of the room. I watched as family and friends filled the space, congratulating Emma, shaking my parents' hands and offering empty smiles my way. No one knew what I had planned. That was the beauty of it. The speeches began. My aunt spoke about Emma's determination. My mom recounted the story of how they found her, and my dad's voice quivered with pride as he listed her achievements. I listened, calm and patient. My time was coming. After the last speech, right before the cake was cut, I caught the bartender's eye. He nodded and handed me a glass of champagne. The room quieted, all eyes turning toward me. They probably thought I was about to offer another tribute to Emma, another moment to prop up the story of her success. I took a breath, steadying the fire inside me. My voice was clear and strong as I spoke. "I just want to say a few words," I began, the glass cool in my hand. "I know today is a celebration of Emma's accomplishments, and she deserves recognition for her hard work." I paused, letting the words settle. Emma's smile widened, smug and satisfied. "But I also have something to celebrate. For years I've been building a business piece by piece with my own hands, and I'm proud to announce that next month I'll be opening my very own store." The silence that followed was deafening. The smiles froze on faces, confusion rippling through the crowd. Then, like a match catching fire, the room shifted. My aunt clapped first, then others followed. People turned to me, asking about the store location, what kind of products I'd have, and if there were going to be discounts. My heart pounded, but I stood tall. This was my moment, and I was going to take every second of it. Emma's smile faded, her face paling. My parents' expressions were stiff, eyes darting around as if searching for a way to regain control. But they couldn't. This wasn't their story to tell anymore. A few relatives who had just been praising Emma now crowded around me, excitedly asking for more details. My aunt pulled out her phone, showing pictures of my products she'd bought over the years. The energy in the room shifted. The spotlight, for once, was on me. Out of the corner of my eye, I saw Emma take a step back, her hands clenched at her sides. The realization that she wasn't the center of attention hit her hard. Her practiced smile crumbled, replaced by a scowl. She whispered something to my mom, who was struggling to keep her composure, but I didn't care. The years of being invisible, of having my accomplishments buried under Emma's shadow, were gone. People were genuinely interested in what I'd done, what I'd built. They weren't here for another story about Emma's past or my parents' savior complex. They were here for something real, something I had created with my own hands. The conversations swirled around me, filled with congratulations and excitement. For the first time in my life, I felt seen. When the event wound down and the last guests left, the air in the room grew heavy. My parents' perfect smiles dropped away. My mom's face was tight, her hands trembling as she cleared the plates. My dad's jaw was clenched so hard I thought his teeth might crack. Emma had disappeared midway through the evening, her face streaked with mascara, unable to stand the shift in attention. She'd spent her life basking in the glow my parents provided, never knowing what it was like to stand in the shadows. Finally, my mom turned to me, her voice cold. "Why did you have to ruin her day?" I looked her in the eyes, feeling a calm I hadn't known before. "I didn't ruin anything. You wanted us to share a celebration, so I shared it. Isn't that what you've been asking me to do my whole life?" She flinched, her eyes flashing with anger and something else. Maybe guilt, maybe confusion. My dad stepped forward, his voice low and dangerous. "You're just jealous, like you've always been." I shook my head. "No, I'm not jealous. I'm tired of being invisible." They had no response to that. Their excuses, the ones I'd heard my entire life, felt thin and useless now. I wasn't the 6-year-old boy who could be guilted into giving up his birthday, or the teenager who swallowed his hurt to keep the peace. I was done shrinking myself. I walked out of the venue, the night air cool and fresh. My heart was light. The weight I'd carried for so long, the feeling of being second best, of never being enough, was gone. I had my store opening ahead of me, my own path carved out by my own hands. Whether my parents chose to be there or not didn't matter anymore. For the first time, I knew my worth, and nothing could take that away. The night air felt different as I walked away from the venue, lighter, clearer. I took a deep breath, feeling something I hadn't felt in years. Freedom. No more bending, no more hiding, no more giving away my moments. I was no longer the boy waiting for scraps of attention. I was a man who knew his worth, standing on the ground I had carved out with my own hands. The silence from my parents was deafening in the days that followed. No calls, no messages. At first, a small part of me wondered if I'd gone too far. The old, familiar guilt crept in, whispering that maybe I was being selfish, that I should have kept the peace. But that voice was quieter now, almost a ghost of its former self. I reminded myself of the truth. I hadn't ruined anything. I'd taken my moment, something I was owed. I threw myself into preparations for the store opening. There was always something to do, arranging displays, organizing inventory, setting up the checkout system. The work filled my days and quieted my thoughts. My hands, steady and strong, shaped this new chapter of my life. 2 weeks before the grand opening, my phone buzzed. My heart skipped when I saw it was my mom. For a moment, I hesitated. Part of me still wanted to believe this call could be different. Maybe she was ready to understand, ready to finally see me. I answered. Her voice was cold. No greeting, no warmth, just straight to the point. "Your father and I have been talking. "We think you should hire Emma as the store manager. She just graduated and she needs a job. It's the least you can do after everything that happened. The least I could do." I felt my jaw tighten, the old anger flickering back to life. After everything that happened, they had made my store opening about Emma's graduation. They had ignored my boundaries, and now they wanted me to hand over a position I'd earned through sweat and sacrifice? "No," I said, my voice steady. "Emma's not qualified to manage my store." My mom's sigh came through the phone, heavy with disappointment. "She has a business degree. She doesn't need experience. She's family. You owe her this." I swallowed the bitter laugh rising in my throat. Family. The word felt hollow coming from her. I owed Emma nothing. I owed myself everything. "I built this business by myself," I said quietly. "Emma didn't help me take orders at midnight. She didn't help me pack boxes or manage angry customers. This store isn't a gift. It's my hard work, and I'm not handing it over." There was silence on the line. I could almost hear the gears turning in her head, trying to find the right combination of guilt and shame to pull me back under her control. "You're making a big mistake," she finally said. "If you don't do this, we won't be at the grand opening. And neither will Emma." It was a threat, the same kind they'd used my whole life. The idea of them not showing up was supposed to make me crumble, but it didn't. Their absence didn't scare me anymore. "Then don't come," I said, the finality of my words ringing in my ears. "That's your choice." I hung up before she could say anything else. My hands were shaking, but not from fear, from relief. I had drawn a line, one they couldn't cross. I wasn't their puppet anymore, dancing to whatever song they played. The night of the grand opening arrived, and the store shimmered under the glow of soft lights. The windows were polished until they sparkled, my handmade pieces displayed proudly for everyone to see. Friends gathered outside, chatting excitedly. Some of my online customers had traveled just to be there, faces I knew only from usernames now smiling back at me. My heart pounded as I stood by the entrance, a pair of silver scissors in my hand, ready to cut the ribbon. This was it, the culmination of years of work, of late nights and early mornings. The moment was mine, pure and untainted. I took a deep breath, looked at the faces around me, and smiled. These were my people, the ones who saw me, who believed in what I'd built. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice carrying over the crowd. "This store isn't just a business. It's a dream I've worked for, a place that I hope brings joy to everyone who walks through the door." I cut the ribbon, the snip of the scissors sharp and satisfying. Cheers erupted around me, warm and genuine. People flooded in, admiring the displays, touching the products I had crafted with care. The air buzzed with excitement, and for the first time in my life, I felt whole. I caught sight of my reflection in the window, a man standing tall, proud of what he'd created, no longer a shadow, no longer invisible. This was me, out in the open, claiming my space in the world. I didn't need my parents' approval or Emma's validation. Their absence didn't leave a void. It left room for people who truly cared, who saw me for who I was, not who they wanted me to be. And in that moment, surrounded by laughter and light, I knew I was finally free. In the weeks after the grand opening, the store flourished. Every day, people walked through the door, curious and excited to see what I had created. Some were loyal customers from my online shop, others were strangers who had seen the buzz around my launch. Each person who stepped in left with a piece of my work, and with it, a piece of my story. The walls of the store, lined with my handmade pieces, felt alive, more alive than any birthday party or family gathering I'd ever been part of. Each creation told its own tale of late nights, quiet focus, and a determination that no amount of neglect could erase. This place was more than just a shop. It was proof that I could shape my own destiny, even when the odds were stacked against me. My days were full now, not just with work, but with joy. I built connections with my customers, listened to their stories, and shared pieces of my journey. I wasn't invisible here. Every smile, every thank you, every repeat customer reminded me that I was seen, appreciated, and respected. This was my community, one I had built from the ground up. Of course, there was still silence from my parents. Their absence hung in the background like a shadow, but it didn't loom over me the way it used to. It was just there, part of my past, not my present. They hadn't reached out, and I hadn't either. For the first time in my life, I wasn't waiting for their approval or hoping for their recognition. I didn't need it. One afternoon, as I was restocking shelves, the doorbell chimed. I looked up expecting another customer, but instead I saw my uncle standing there. The same uncle who'd pulled me aside during my first shared birthday party, the only one who had ever really noticed my pain. His eyes crinkled into a smile as he took in the store. "This place is something else," he said, his voice warm. "You did this all on your own." I nodded, a quiet pride swelling in my chest. "Yeah, I did." He walked around, picking up a few items, admiring the craftsmanship. Then he turned back to me, his expression softening. "Your parents might not see it, but I want you to know I'm proud of you. You didn't let their blind spots hold you back." His words settled deep inside me, like seeds taking root. I hadn't realized how much I needed to hear that from someone who truly understood. I smiled, a real, unburdened smile. "Thank you." He lingered for a while, chatting and asking questions about the business and about my plans. When he left, he promised to come back soon, and I knew he would. Days turned into weeks, and life kept moving forward. My store grew steadily, and so did I. I found peace in the rhythm of creating, selling, and connecting with people who valued my work. The emptiness that had haunted me for years faded, replaced by the fullness of a life I'd built on my own terms. One evening, as the sun dipped low and painted the sky in hues of gold and red, I closed up the store and stood by the window. The light reflected off the glass, and for a moment I caught my reflection. I saw a man who had walked through the fire of neglect, disappointment, and loneliness, and come out stronger. I thought of Emma, of my parents, of all the years spent trying to earn their love and attention. I no longer carried bitterness toward them. They had their own paths, their own stories, and I had mine. Their choices didn't define me anymore. My worth wasn't tied to their approval or their love for Emma. I was enough just as I was. I walked out into the cool evening air, feeling the world stretch out before me. I didn't know exactly what the future held, but I knew one thing for sure: I was free. Free to build, to dream, to live my life without apology. The shadows of the past might always be there, but they no longer had power over me. My path was mine to walk, and I was walking it with my head held high, and for the first time, that was more than enough.